In reference to the water that the Samaritan woman came to retrieve, Jesus says, "People soon become thirsty again after drinking this water. But the water that I give them takes away thirst altogether. It becomes a perpetual spring within them, giving them eternal life." This past Thursday morning, Ginger and I got up early, and we headed to Nashville to celebrate our son's 31st birthday. And we did so with a little reluctance, because in the news they said it was a civil emergency, that only people that had an emergency needed to be on the road. Well, I've never heard what they do to you if you don't have an emergency. And so I said, "Ginger, what are we going to do if we get stopped trying to get out of Marietta to go north to Nashville?" She said, "Just tell them you're a pastor." Well, I didn't get stopped, and I didn't have to tell them I was a pastor. But anyway, I was determined to go to Nashville to be with our son on his 31st birthday for a lot of reasons. But we haven't had a chance this past summer when he got his Master of Business degree to talk about what he did, what he learned, what he studied, all this kind of stuff. And it's always interesting for us as father and son to talk about different perspectives on business transactions, or whatever. And weren't we right with it last week when we talked about Bitcoins? Because the day after that sermon, two of the key leaders in the world in the Bitcoin industry were arrested for money laundering. And so I said, since I had such good luck talking about business last week, I thought we would move to a different topic of business this week, and just for your information. And so what we're going to talk about today is investing. And so I asked Aaron yesterday morning, we were having a cup of coffee and we were getting ready to leave and come back home. And I said, "Aaron," and part of his job with his clients is to analyze companies and advise his clients on whether or not this company might be a good investment or not. I don't know what you call that, but he does that all the time. And I said, "Aaron, knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time 20, 30 years, what companies would you invest in?" And he started rattling off all these different companies that have grown by thousands of percent, that had we invested in those companies, we'd all be very wealthy and could retire at an early age. And he said, "Dad, let me ask you something. Knowing what you know now, if you went back 20 or 30 years, what might you invest in?" No problem whatsoever. I know exactly what I would have gotten into 20, 30 years ago. Bottled water. Can you believe that? Water is free. And there are companies all over the world making millions of dollars selling us water in these fancy plastic bottles. Isn't that awesome? Water is something that we always have a need for. There's never a time when we don't need water. The human body can maybe last 3 days without water. Am I close? Am I close? Okay. So maybe 3 days without water, and then you have to have your body replenished. I was watching people on the news this morning, a volunteer from the Red Cross, advising travelers what to have in their cars should we be saddled with an emergency that we had this past week. And he named a few things, but he said the most important thing everybody needs to keep a supply of in their homes and in their cars is water. What an investment this would be had we got in on the front end of it. And remember a few weeks ago, I think it was in Charleston, West Virginia. They had a very bad chemical spill in a river, and they couldn't drink their water. And so they delivered to them thousands of cases of bottled water. And these little things are very convenient, because can you imagine a big tanker truck coming up and everybody having a styrofoam cup to go up there to get water? That would be chaos. But bottled water is so convenient and so easy. Now, another thing that Aaron and I talked about with regards to bottled water, he said that of all the companies that are in business right now, selling bottled water has the most profit per item. Duh! Because it's a free commodity. All they have to do is put it in these bottles and go up to you and say, would you like some water for $2? And we will buy this water. I'm carrying some right now. And every time you purchase a bottle of water from somebody at Braves game or something like that, as soon as you hand them the $2, you know what they're thinking? Sucker. This is amazing. And so anyway, but you have to have a building, and you have to have a process to purify the water. So 20, 30 years ago, I would have bought a building, and when I was in high school, I had a friend whose father had the original patent on a device that would create pure water. It's called reverse osmosis. And he had a setup so that he could put it in doctor's offices, dentist offices, hospitals, wherever they needed purified water. So Bert asked me to come and see how the process worked. It was in a very small building. Does anybody know what reverse osmosis is? Well, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you. I got to the office, and we went back into the back room where this device was. And I said, Bert, how does reverse osmosis work? He said, you put the water in the end here, and it comes out pure. It goes through there, and it's pure. That's reverse osmosis. What this contraption, what are you laughing at? Are you a chemist? No. Well, I tell you, if you ever need to explain a chemical process, just ask me. I'll help you. What reverse osmosis does is it takes the impurities out of water so that it's pure. And Bert said, you know how we know when this has been a successful process? He had a light bulb on one end of the tank. On the other end was an electrical charge. And he says, if the light bulb ever comes on, we know that the purification process has to be redone. Did you know that pure H2O will not conduct electricity? That's true. So I went home and I got me an electric cord and I stuck it in a bucket, and I wanted to see how pure the water was. So I stuck my hand in it. That's why my hair looks like it does today. Now look, you guessed today, you believe about 2/3 of what you hear, okay? Isn't that right, Roy? About 2/3. But anyway, you purify the water, you bottle it up, you sell it, and you make millions. Today, but you need that water again. The gospel lesson is about a water that Jesus offers, and he says that it's like a perpetual well inside of all of us. It never runs dry. And in the end of time, it bestows upon us, the people that have that water, eternal life. Now, the story is a long story about Jesus and his encounter with the Samaritan woman. I cut it off at verse 15 because this gospel lesson is not so much about the woman as it is about the water. The next few verses that we excluded from today's gospel lesson is about this woman and her life. Number one, she was a Samaritan woman, and Jews are not supposed to have anything to do with Samaritans. We won't really need to get into that. But the Samaritans were considered an unclean race of people. And so she's a little bit shocked that Jesus would even speak to her and even ask her for anything. Also, the rest of the chapter goes on about the fact that she had been married how many times? 5 times. And the person that she was with now, she was not married to. So, some preachers get all excited about this woman that is supposedly immoral. But we don't know if she's immoral or not. Her 5 husbands that she had previously might have died from some illness or something. We don't know that. And then she's living with a person she's not married to. Well, we don't know that this man has taken her in so that she wouldn't starve to death. There was a story about this lady that was stuck in the snow on Tuesday. Her car completely died. This man in front of her sees what happens and says, "Where are you going?" And she said, "Marietta." He said, "So am I." She gets in the car with him, doesn't know who he is, spends 10 hours with him, and makes it safely to Marietta. So we don't know if this woman is a good or bad woman. But can't you just hear the preachers preaching today about how terrible it is to be divorced? The Lord don't want us to be divorced. How terrible it is to be living with somebody that you're not married to. Are y'all married? I don't mean to be meddling now. We're having fun, Barry, aren't we? I love having fun. So, the reason I'm not going to get into this woman's life is because to Jesus, it made absolutely no difference. Her morality, her race, her sex, none of that mattered to Jesus. And so what are we supposed to learn from this text from John? Are we supposed to learn about how to be better people from this woman's mistakes, supposedly? Or is Jesus trying to teach us something more important? Now, a lot of stuff I say in a sermon really is not all that important. This is important. What I'm going to tell you now is, if you don't remember anything else from this sermon, I want you to remember this. And then after I say it, I'm going to explain it. And then after that, we're going to call it a day. Christianity, we learn from this lesson, is not a moral religion. Christianity is not a moral religion. It has nothing to do with morality. If it did, how many of us would be able to stand in the kingdom of heaven? God tried that moral religion with the old covenant. Obey these 10 commandments and you will be right with me. Everybody failed. St. Paul said everybody has fallen short of the glory of God. So Christianity is the new covenant. It's not about us. It's not about our morality. It's not about how many times we've been married. It's not about what we've done right or what we've done wrong. Christianity is about what Jesus has done for all of us. Now, Jesus has said to this woman, if you knew who I was, you would ask me for the living water, and I would give it to you. And it would spring up in you like a well that would never run dry. And you would have everlasting life. And she said, give me that water. Every one of us today has that water. But as we come to the close of this gospel lesson, we need to know exactly what this water is. Jesus never says in the gospel lesson what exactly the water is. I'm going to give you the Lutheran take on this. The water that Jesus is talking about is the good news of the resurrection. The water that Jesus is talking about is the gospel. The water that Jesus is talking about is any time a human being comes into an encounter with Jesus Christ, they have received the water. In the Lutheran Church, we encounter Christ in baptism. We encounter Christ in the bread and wine of Holy Communion. And we encounter Christ in the proclamation of the good news of Jesus Christ. Well, on the way back from Nashville, I asked Ginger a question. If I tell people, as the gospel does, that this is an eternal well that will never run dry, will there be any incentive left to come to church on a regular basis? Because once you get that water, and if it's eternal, we could say to ourselves, why bother going to church every Sunday? What's the importance of worship if we have this eternal water in our spirits? Well, the well that you have, which is Jesus Christ, will never run dry. But there are times in our lives when it will get dangerously low. So the reason it's important to come and worship is, number one, to say thank you for the living water. And number two, to top it off,